Let me start with you, Mr. Saunders. Africa is so endowed with beautiful places to see, and you are in the tourism business. What are some of the hottest spots in terms of tourism and why?
Well, I would say in West Africa, Ghana still is the ultimate location to go to in West Africa because of the rich culture and the people themselves. But I also think that there are other places in West Africa just as intriguing. Cameroon is now starting to come on the cusp because of the people having the DNA sampling being done. That's very interesting to them. Of course, Southern Africa, there's just so many destinations, but you have to start with South Africa. But my favorite is Botswana and Namibia. And I would say going towards East Africa, Mozambique, Tanzania. And I just went to Madagascar, and it's a very, very fascinating destination because of the exotic wildlife.
And you haven't been to Kenya yet.
No, I've been to Kenya many times.
Definitely. And I'm sure, David, you can talk about tourism in Sierra Leone and so many other parts of Africa.
I was just going to say he hasn't been to Sierra Leone yet.
He hasn't been? Oh,
yes, I've been to Sierra Leone.
We'll find out. Trust me, the comments and the tweets and the Facebook will be dealing with all parts of Africa today. And definitely a continent that is rich in so many things, including music. David, you're the host of the African Beat. Let's talk about music. Because for me, maybe one of the things I think about when I think about Mother Africa is traditional music. But tell me, what is the most compelling in terms of music? What kind of music would that be?
Well, for presently, yes, traditional music has been there. The African traditional music has been there. And right now, when we look at music from Africa, we particularly focus on something we call Afrobeat. These days, in as much as when the music started a long time ago, like in the 1940s and 50s, music was taken from African music was taken from Cuba, taken down to Africa, like to the Congo, and this music were transformed from the Cuban style of music to the rumba that the Congolese call rumba.
Yeah, you hear the rumba, yes.
But these days, we have the music has developed in such a way wherein the music from West Africa, in particular, like from Nigeria and Ghana, the hip life, has been transformed to become the Afrobeat, where you have a new style of music like the Azonto from Ghana, with P Square coming with their own style of Afrobeat. It has taken over West Africa, and it is taking over Africa, because even from East Africa, when you hear them sing now, it's like what they're singing in Nigeria and Ghana.
And one thing that stands out almost in every music you think about from Africa is the drums.
Oh yeah. Well, that we cannot do, because that is what makes the beat.
Yeah.
Like on my show, I said the power of the beat is in the African beat. You cannot beat that without the African drums. Without the drums, there is no African music. There is no African beat. So the drums are very, very important when it comes to African music.
And I'm sure you'll walk us through some of the jargon in terms of instruments that people have to play. And we can never get enough of music. But again, coming to you, Mr. Saunders, well, like I said, people have been sending us comments, and I'm sure Mariama will take it over, but they will tell you, come to Egypt, come to North Africa, go to South Africa, go to Kenya, go to Mombasa, and all those places. Go to Freetown.
Go to Freetown.
And see some of those historical sites. But then what really do people want to see, especially you coming from Africa, from the United States, and especially when it comes to African Americans connecting with their roots in Africa? What do you say? This is where you need to go. This is what you should see. And this is what makes you, Mr. Saunders, feel so much at peace and at home in Africa.
Yes. Well, I travel all over the continent of Africa, 32 countries and counting. And I tell people to come to Africa so you can find yourself. You need to really discover your roots, but be open-minded. Don't come there with a predisposition about what Africa will be, because the best experience you can have is to discover Africa, discover the people, discover the cuisine, as you stated, discover the music. The wildlife is fantastic, but just the ambiance of being in the motherland, the individuals will find this fascinates them and they will want to come back.
And the hospitality sector, when you look at the hospitality sector, these days, many African governments are working on that day and night to make sure that once the tourists come into their country, because it's such a high income earner, that people are entertained culturally You go to Sierra Leone, there's the taste of the culture of the Sierra Leoneans. There's the taste of, the culture of Uganda. And so what do you see in terms of that, and what are the challenges? Is that industry doing well now? Because as we heard from my colleague's report, Paul Ndiho, last year alone, that sector has fetched Africa a whopping 150 billion US dollars.
Well, the main thing with traveling to Africa, particularly for African Americans, is the long haul. When they look at the distance and the time required to get to Africa, it gives them a shock. But we tell them that's just the experience of repeating the passage. The middle passage, they came over, now you're going back. And once you get there, experience and enjoy yourself. Have a fantastic time in Africa. But the cost of Africa is quite phenomenal. Once you get there, the rate of return on the income, US dollar, is very strong. There's so much to see and do. And right now, this is the best place for tourism destinations for African Americans and for all Americans.
And for all other tourists coming from other places. David, let's get to the music. Like we said, you can have beautiful places to see without music. It starts even with the tourist cars. They start listening to the music as soon as they land at the airport.
Yeah, and I think some of the first things that they look for when they land at the airport, is when they hear the music, they look for where the sound is coming from, what instruments are being played, because like when you have the djembe drum, the djembe drum, you have what we call in Sierra Leone the kondi, that is being created from like aluminum pan, with keys on top of it. I will look at that and call it like the balangi, which we'll say originally is the keyboard. That was the original keyboard, the balangi. It's all wood, and when you hit it, it gives you different sound, just like when you play the keyboard. And when you get people like this, as soon as you enter into a country and you're being welcomed with voices like that and instruments like that, before even the guitar started coming, you're being welcomed with instruments like that, you begin to feel at home, because these are stuff that you don't hear where you come from. You don't hear that all the time. So when you go back there, those are some of the things you begin to look for. Things that you're not used to seeing or hearing in the United States or in Europe. But when you go to Africa, you look for them, because that is what you're going to look for, something new.
That is Africa. It brings in the uniqueness of the continent. And I'm sure Mr. Saunders will agree with you, because when he goes there, it's a totally different atmosphere when you listen to the music as you traverse the various countries, whether it's Southern Africa, Eastern Africa, or Western Africa. And then again, David, there's the Northern African music. If you think about Ethiopia, for example, they have very unique music.
Yeah.
And they have different instruments, but still, it kind of stands out. It's like every country has its own thing that kind of identifies with the people and with the culture.
That is the beauty of Africa, and that is the beauty of the culture of Africa, because for every area of Africa that you go, we have different cultures.
Yes.
Between different styles, and even the music, the drumming, the dancing, and that is why sometimes when we come from Africa, we come to the United States of America or any other parts of the world, some of us tend to forget about our culture. People are doing that. They tend to forget about where they're coming from. And I'm not saying it is bad to adopt to the country where you are, but don't forget where you're coming from, because when you forget those cultures, you cannot pass them on to your children, and then the whole culture is going to die. So that is the beauty. So when you go there, like you talked about the Ethiopians. The Ethiopians, they've got some beautiful music, and when they dance to those music, whether you want to enjoy it or not, you're going to enjoy it, because their dancing goes with their beat.
David,
it goes with the kind of beat that they have.
We'll take it from there, because we are concerned about losing that tradition. We're concerned about being, adopting to other cultures and not passing along to the younger generations what we've been taught. But let me pause for a short break.